The story of Google in Australia is a really interesting one,
Yeah.
and it ties in quite nicely with entrepreneurship, because it was really a startup company called Where To Technologies. That was the reason that Google started its engineering or its R&D in Australia. So startup Where To Technologies, a North Sydney startup company, had developed what we now know as Google Maps. So the early prototype for Google Maps. So Google acquired that company in 2004. Four-person company. Google decided to basically let those engineers stay in Australia, and they kind of started to grow and hire quite slowly over the next couple of years. I was hired, as I mentioned, in early 2007 with the mandate to grow the organization more quickly. So Google in Australia has over 1,000 employees, and over half of those are in engineering. Not all of those are software or R&D roles. We also have a large number of operational roles as well, because as you can imagine, Google owns and runs a lot of infrastructure. But it started with that initial acquisition in 2004. Entrepreneurship is really the skills required to go about identifying opportunities and tackling problems and actually figuring out how to solve real-world problems and take those solutions to market. Now, those same skills apply not just to startup companies, but also to large organizations, including multinationals. So I really feel that entrepreneurial skills should be considered career skills or life skills. It's not just about learning what it takes to start a business and run a business. That's actually only a subset of what's required. It's really more about identifying opportunities, thinking about how you can go after those opportunities, how you can implement solutions to those opportunities. So it's just as applicable to large organizations such as a Google as it is to someone who's thinking about starting a business. Are entrepreneurs born or made? A very, very good question. I think you can grow entrepreneurs. I think it's fair to say that some people are probably a little bit more entrepreneurial by birth, but as with many, many disciplines, practice makes perfect. And so I do think you can grow entrepreneurs to a very large extent, and I don't think you have to be a born entrepreneur. That's certainly my view. I mean, I grew up in a family where we didn't even know what an entrepreneur was, so I don't think I was a born entrepreneur. But I kind of stumbled into it, and I improved my skills. I met interesting people, and here I am today, having done a number of startup companies. And so, no, I think you can grow and groom entrepreneurs. I do. There are commonalities between entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. Yeah. I think the first common attribute or common trait is that entrepreneurs, whether they're operating within an organization or they're thinking about starting a business, they're the kinds of people that identify opportunities. And they're not afraid to basically go after those opportunities. And that's true within a large organization as well as in startup companies as well. So I guess not being afraid to kind of pursue the unknown a little bit is certainly one big trait. The other trait, which is common, is just the ability to get things done. And that's a hard thing to measure, but I think we know there are people that are tenacious and refuse to accept no for an answer. They know how to make things happen. They know how to get things done. And that's just as important in a large organization as in a startup. In fact, probably more important. It can be actually quite hard to get things done in a large organization. So those same entrepreneurial skills that enable you to figure out, how do you move forward, how do you kind of progress a solution, they apply equally as well to a large organization as to a startup. So I'd say they're probably two of the common attributes. Again, identifying opportunities and the ability to kind of execute and get things done. There's probably a third attribute I see too, and we often describe this at Google as moonshot thinking. Where the moonshot thinking kind of comes from the original Apollo program, where there was the idea that we could actually land someone on the moon within the decade. It was very bold, very ambitious. At the time, we weren't even sure we could do it. And if you remember that famous John F. Kennedy's speech, within a decade we'll land a person on the moon. Really, at the time, no one knew if we could actually do that, but it didn't stop. It didn't stop us from having that vision, that bold vision. I think the ability to kind of really go after a big vision is something also that you see in common, whether you're entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial. I think innovation is fundamentally about finding new ways of doing things, or new products, new services. Innovation is crucial to a startup or an entrepreneurial business. Innovation is what ultimately will differentiate a startup from, say, a small business. There's a lot of confusion. People say, oh, I'm a startup, and actually, well, not really. You might be a viable small business, you might be a professional services business, but if you're not innovating, that means you're not really developing a competitive advantage, and you're not developing a way to scale the business. Having a competitive advantage is extremely important in this day of global competition. You're not competing with another business down the street, you're competing with a business on the other side of the planet. So thinking about your competitive advantage and understanding your competitive advantage is crucial. Now, there are sometimes boutique opportunities that might be of a regional nature, where you can get by without having a global competitive advantage. But the big opportunities, you could say the Google scale opportunities or the Facebook scale opportunities, are about establishing global competitive advantage. So Google has what we call the 70-20-10 rule. So 70% of our R&D is focused on essentially incremental improvements to our existing products. We have, and that's not to say there isn't innovation happening, but it's very focused innovation. We've got existing products like Google Apps or Gmail or Chrome or Android. We have large installed bases, large numbers of users. It's important that we continue to innovate on these products. And that innovation is necessarily constrained by the fact that we have an installed base. So it's necessarily somewhat incremental, and that's okay. We have to continue to come out with new versions of Android, new versions of Chrome. Occasionally you'll see, though, completely new approaches in these products, which leads to the 20% bucket. The 20% bucket is adjoining innovation, so it's still innovation which is related to our established or core businesses. So but it's new ways of doing things that won't necessarily feature in the next release or even the next few releases, but it will perhaps feature into a future release, a completely different way of doing things. And then finally, there's the 10% bucket, which is really blue sky or moonshot or 10x. And things like self-driving cars, stratospheric balloon networks, Project Loon, Google Glass, those types of things fit into the 10% bucket. They're quite unrelated to everything else we're doing, but they could ultimately spin off completely new businesses for Google in the future. So I think that 70-20-10 model is actually quite a good model, and I think many organizations could apply something similar. The point is recognizing there's a large percentage of your innovation that necessarily has to support your existing businesses. If you let those existing businesses languish, you'll ultimately, lose customers, lose users, and that's not a good thing for any business. But you also have to recognize it's not sufficient to be purely incremental, hence the 20%, looking for some big changes in future versions of those products. And then, of course, the 10% is the blue sky stuff. Sometimes thinking about something in a very, very bold, unprecedented manner forces you to look at things differently. I'll give you a specific example. If I was on an automotive engineering team and my boss came in to me and said, "Oh, we need to improve fuel efficiency by 10%," and I'm a smart automotive engineer, and I'd probably go tweak things or get my team to tweak things, and I'd figure out how to do that just by linear incremental improvements on existing technology. But if the vision was not 10% better but 10x better, I'd have to probably throw out everything we're doing and think about something radically different. And sometimes that big vision forces that 10x thinking, and it forces you to pursue something you weren't even contemplating earlier. So it's both a rallying cry, but it also forces, it can be a forcing function for doing things very differently, and really in doing so, making much more profound changes than would have been possible otherwise. There are some things where, you can never have enough. And I think innovation and creativity are in the category of, these are qualities that you can never really have enough of even in an organization if you're to be successful. The thing that I would offer, suggest to any aspiring entrepreneur is just do it. Just take that first step. There's a good chance if you're listening to this MOOC, you're here because you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. Perhaps you have an idea. You might even be thinking about taking those first steps to creating a business. My advice is just do it. Just start. Start to plug those gaps. Go to find some others who are excited about your vision, your mission. Complement your team. The first step is always the hardest, but it's that first step that opens up all of the opportunities. And with every step, you're going to learn new things. If you don't take that step, you don't learn anything. So step one, you'll learn a few things. Your second step, you'll learn a few more things. And with all those learnings, you'll be able to make better decisions about your opportunity. So just do it. Take that first step. The only other thing I would add is don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. There's a good chance that you'll succeed not because you know more than other people in a given industry. You're more likely to succeed because you challenge assumptions. You do things differently. You think differently.